What would you do if a wild fishing cat and her kitten showed up at your door during a storm? Imagine a stormy night, thunder crashing, and a drenched mother cat seeking refuge, her fragile kitten barely clinging to life. How did one cabin owner make the impossible choice to save them? The storm was relentless, and their survival seemed uncertain. But unlike many who might turn away, this owner took action, forging an extraordinary bond with the wild. From fear and uncertainty to trust and survival, this story shows how compassion can bridge the gap between humans and nature. Because sometimes, the smallest actions make the biggest difference. Hi everyone, welcome to our channel. Today, I'm excited to share a new story with you. Please subscribe us. The storm raged outside, fierce winds howling through the dense forests surrounding Emma's secluded cabin. Rain pelted the roof like a relentless drumbeat, and flashes of lightning illuminated the darkened woods in eerie bursts. Emma, a quiet nature enthusiast who had chosen the solitude of this cabin to reconnect with the wild, sat by the fireplace, her only company a cup of tea and the comforting crackle of the flames. A sudden noise outside startled her. At first, she thought it might be a falling branch, but then she heard it again, a faint, insistent scratching at the door. Curious and cautious, Emma grabbed a flashlight and approached. As she opened the door, the beam of light revealed a drenched and bedraggled figure huddled on the porch. It was a fishing cat, its sleek coat matted with rain and mud, its golden eyes wide with a mix of exhaustion and fear. Emma's breath caught as she noticed a small bundle pressed against the cat's side, a tiny kitten, equally soaked and shivering. The mother's protective stance and wary gaze made it clear she was desperate yet hesitant. Emma stood frozen for a moment, the storm swirling around them, knowing she was about to face an extraordinary decision. Emma crouched just inside the doorway, her heart racing as she observed the drenched fishing cat on her porch. The animal's piercing eyes locked onto hers, wary yet pleading, as if it knew she was its only hope. Emma's instinct was to help, but her mind raced with doubts. This wasn't a domestic cat, it was a wild predator, one that could easily lash out in fear or protectiveness. The cat remained motionless for a moment, its lean, muscular frame trembling under the relentless downpour. Then Emma noticed something unusual. The fishing cat wasn't alone. Nestled against its side, barely visible through the rain, was a tiny, shivering bundle. Squinting, Emma realized it was a kitten, a fragile, soaking wet baby that seemed barely alive. The mother positioned herself protectively over the kitten, shielding it as best she could from the elements. Emma's pulse quickened. The kitten's chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular breaths, and its tiny limbs hung limply. If she didn't act quickly, the kitten wouldn't survive the night. But how could she approach without spooking the mother or risking injury? Emma's gaze shifted between the fishing cat and the kitten, her thoughts swirling like the storm outside. She stepped back into the cabin, her movements slow and deliberate, leaving the door slightly ajar. From the kitchen, she retrieved a small towel and a shallow bowl of leftover chicken broth, warmed slightly over the fire. Returning to the doorway, she placed the bowl on the floor just inside and waited. Her own breathing felt loud against the symphony of the storm. The fishing cat hesitated, its sharp eyes darting between the bowl and Emma. Hunger and desperation were evident in its movements, a slight lean forward, the nostrils flaring as it caught the scent of the broth. Emma stayed perfectly still, her heart pounding as she willed the animal to trust her. After what felt like an eternity, the fishing cat inched closer, dragging its kitten carefully along with its jaws. It stopped just short of the doorframe, its body coiled like a spring, ready to flee. Emma didn't dare move. She watched as the cat tentatively sniffed the bowl, its ears twitching with every crack of thunder. With one cautious lap of its tongue, the cat tasted the broth, then began drinking in earnest. Relief washed over Emma, but she knew this was only the beginning. The kitten let out a faint, pitiful mew, barely audible over the storm. Emma's chest tightened at the sound. The mother paused, nudging the kitten gently with her nose, as if reassuring it. The interaction was heartbreakingly tender, and Emma felt her resolve harden. She couldn't let them face this storm alone. The storm outside grew fiercer, the winds howling like a living thing as Emma huddled near the cabin door. She watched the fishing cat cautiously sip the broth she had left, its sharp ears flicking with every roll of thunder. The kitten, small and frail, lay motionless by its mother's side, its tiny chest rising and falling in faint, irregular rhythms. The sight tugged at Emma's heart, but she remained still, her instincts telling her not to rush. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as the fishing cat alternated between lapping up the broth and nudging the kitten with its nose. Emma could see the desperation in the mother's movements, its soft chirrups and nudges seemed like pleas for the little one to respond. But the kitten remained limp, its head lolling slightly with each movement. Emma's pulse quickened as she realized the gravity of the situation. The kitten was critically weak, and time was running out. The storm intensified, rattling the cabin walls and extinguishing the last traces of light from the setting sun. Emma lit an oil lamp, its warm glow flickering against the shadows. She set it on the floor near the doorway, hoping the light might soothe the frightened animals. Outside, the rain poured relentlessly, forming rivulets that snaked across the porch and pulled around the mother cat's paws. Emma faced a wrenching decision. The kitten clearly needed help, its fragile body was visibly struggling against the elements. She had supplies in her cabin, a small first aid kit, a heating pad, and even a syringe she'd once used to feed an abandoned bird. But could she risk scaring the mother away by intervening? Or worse, provoke it into abandoning the kitten altogether? She took a deep breath, her mind racing through the possibilities. The fishing cat, though wild, had shown a flicker of trust by approaching the broth. Perhaps it understood, on some primal level, that Emma wasn't a threat. She clung to that fragile hope as she grabbed the towel and the syringe from the table, carefully filling it with warm broth. Emma stepped closer to the door, her movements deliberate and slow. She crouched low, making herself as unthreatening as possible, and extended the towel toward the kitten. The fishing cat froze, its golden eyes narrowing as it emitted a low, warning growl. Emma stopped immediately, her body tensing, but she didn't retreat. Instead, she whispered softly, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I just want to help," she murmured, unsure if the cat could understand the words but hoping it could sense her intent. The fishing cat watched her intently, its growl subsiding into a tense silence. Then, to Emma's astonishment, the mother cat stepped back slightly, her tail twitching as she kept her eyes fixed on Emma. It wasn't exactly permission, but it wasn't outright aggression either. Taking the chance, Emma gently reached for the kitten, her fingers brushing against its damp fur. The kitten was alarmingly cold to the touch, its tiny body unnaturally light. Emma's throat tightened as she cradled it in the towel, wrapping it securely to retain whatever warmth she could. The fishing cat tensed but didn't move, its sharp gaze tracking every motion as Emma retreated into the cabin with the kitten. Inside, she placed the kitten on the heating pad, its frail form barely stirring. With shaking hands, she used the syringe to feed it small drops of broth, coaxing it to swallow. Each faint movement of the kitten's mouth felt like a victory, but Emma knew it wasn't out of danger yet. She worked quickly, massaging its tiny paws to stimulate circulation and wiping away the rain-soaked fur. All the while, the fishing cat hovered just outside the door, its silhouette framed by the storm. Emma could feel the mother's tension, her instincts warring between protectiveness and trust. The storm raged on, trapping them in this fragile moment of connection, a wild animal and a human united by the same urgent desire to save a life. The hours crept by as the storm outside continued its relentless assault, but inside the cabin, a fragile calm had taken hold. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor beside the heating pad, her eyes fixed on the tiny kitten wrapped snugly in the towel. Each shallow breath it took felt like a small triumph, and with every careful drop of broth she managed to coax it to swallow, hope stirred in her chest. The fishing cat lingered just beyond the doorway, its golden eyes never leaving Emma. Every muscle in its sleek frame seemed poised for action, but it made no move to interrupt. Instead, it watched with a wary intensity, as if weighing Emma's every action. Occasionally, it let out soft, throaty chirps, and Emma whispered back soothing reassurances. She wasn't sure if the cat understood her words, but it seemed to respond to her calm tone. As the hours passed, the storm began to wane. The wind eased its furious howling, and the rain softened to a steady patter. The kitten stirred slightly, its tiny limbs twitching as if testing their strength. Emma felt a wave of relief as its breathing grew steadier, the shallow rises of its chest becoming more pronounced. She gently stroked its damp fur, marveling at its delicate form and the determination it must have taken to survive this far. The fishing cat shifted closer to the door, now perched just inside the threshold. Its body was still tense, but its earlier hostility had softened into something that almost resembled trust. Emma carefully placed the kitten back on the towel and slid it closer to the mother, stopping just short of the doorway. She held her breath as the fishing cat stepped forward, sniffing the kitten with meticulous care. To Emma's immense relief, the fishing cat gently picked up the kitten by the scruff of its neck and retreated to a dry corner of the porch. The kitten let out a faint mew as its mother nestled it close, grooming it with slow, deliberate strokes of her tongue. The sight brought tears to Emma's eyes, a testament to resilience, trust, and the power of connection. As dawn broke and the first rays of sunlight pierced through the storm clouds, Emma watched the fishing cat and her kitten from the cabin window. They remained on the porch for hours, the mother cat glancing back at Emma occasionally, as if offering silent thanks. In that moment, Emma felt an unspoken bond with the wild creatures she had aided. It was a reminder that even in the face of nature's raw unpredictability, compassion could forge a bridge between two very different worlds. The next day, Emma knew she couldn't leave the fishing cat and her fragile kitten exposed to the elements again. With the storm now a distant memory, she gathered some old blankets and a few sturdy crates, setting up a small shelter just beyond the cabin's porch. She placed it far enough from the house to give the animals space, but close enough that they could feel safe. The mother, still cautious, watched from a distance as Emma worked, but she didn't seem as tense as before. Emma quietly stepped back, leaving food and fresh water in the shelter. Over time, the fishing cat seemed to accept it, gradually moving into the space, keeping the kitten close as it regained its strength. The experience left Emma with a profound sense of connection to the wild, a deep understanding of the delicate balance between human and animal. It reminded her that nature isn't something to be feared or controlled, it's a force to be respected. This encounter reinforced her belief in the importance of coexistence and the role humans play in wildlife conservation. Emma now felt more driven than ever to support wildlife preservation efforts, hoping her small act of kindness could ripple out and inspire others to see the beauty in working with nature, not against it. If this story touched your heart, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel.